We're very pleased to see so many people interested in learning more about nuclear weapons spending in the 2016 budget. Now, obviously, this is a very important topic since so much of our tax money is going towards these weapons of mass destruction. However, I will let the expert, Laicie, go into more details about that. Just to give you a quick breakdown, the webinar will go about an hour, and all attendees will be muted in order to avoid any technical problems. However, we do encourage you to type any questions you may have in the question box, and we'll try to address as many as we can at the end of the presentation. Now, I'll just do a quick intro, and then we'll get started with the presentation. My name is Teresa Schaefer, and I'm the Security Outreach Associate at Physicians for Social Responsibility. I'll be your host for the webinar tonight. Our guest speaker joining us is Laicie Heeley. Laicie is the Policy Director at the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation. She has appeared on television and in print in outlets such as CNN, Time, The Wall Street Journal, and the Associated Press. Prior to joining the Council, Laicie held positions at our very own Physicians for Social Responsibility, as well as the Counter-Terrorist Finance Organization and Global Green USA. Laicie holds a bachelor's degree in political science from the George Washington University and a master's degree in international relations from St. Mary's University. Needless to say, she is an expert in all things nuclear. And with that, Laicie, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Teresa, for that very nice introduction. I will make sure that I have everything pulled up here on my own screen so that you guys can see the slideshow. And there you go. It should be there now. As Teresa said, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here tonight. Thank you for coming out. I am Policy Director at the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation, and every year we take a deep look at the President's budget request. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. Just for those of you who aren't completely familiar with the budget process, maybe partially because it changes every year, Congress has been a little bit the process has been interesting in these past few years, where it's always a little bit different. But this year we may have a regular process. So the regular process is that we should have the President's budget request. The budget committees will formulate a budget resolution. Then we'll have a National Defense Authorization, which will essentially authorize the money, set the funding limits for the programs that will go forward and to the appropriations, and will be appropriated, which is actually where the money is really officially enacted and given to these programs. So all of that's to say, this is just a starting bid. The President's request is very much theoretical at this point, and that's probably a good thing because it's very high this year. So just going forward to look a little bit at the President's request. So these are the top line numbers for the Department of Defense. And some of this money, you might notice, you'll see DOE in there. Some of the money from the Department of Defense that is actually appears in this account, which we call the 050 account. Every various account for the Department of Defense, Department of International Affairs, which is, funds the State Department, they all have their own number. So the Department of Defense, their number is 050. Within that 050 account, we have a few different accounts, and one of those actually goes to fund nuclear weapons programs at the Department of Energy. So we'll see the biggest one of these accounts is 051, which falls under the 050 account. That's the Department of Defense's base budget, which this year is $534 billion. That's the President's request. So that's a big jump up from what we saw in the President's request last year. So you can see next to that what was enacted last year in appropriations and also what the President requested. They were both pretty close. They both came in under the budget caps, which is another important thing that we're going to talk about, and that I'll explain a little bit more. That this request is actually $38 billion more than last year, and it's also the overall request. So this base budget request is $35 billion over the budget caps, which were set by the Budget Control Act in 2011. In 2011, Congress passed the Budget Control Act, which set caps for the 10 years following that year. So this was because our debt had increased so much. We were very concerned about the national debt, very concerned about spending, particularly at the Pentagon. And so Congress passed an act that would place caps for the next 10 years on this spending. And you might hear the word sequestration a lot. That's a common household term now. But you might not realize that sequestration does not actually kick in unless Congress exceeds those budget caps. So the number that we're most concerned about here is that cap number and not so much the sequestration number, because we don't even have to worry about that if Congress is able to appropriate underneath the budget cap. So right now, though, the president would like Congress to get rid of those budget caps. He actually, in his request, has specifically said that if Congress gets rid of the budget caps, then he will take one of these other accounts that folks are concerned about, which is the war funding account, which is not actually right now subject to the caps at all. It falls outside of them entirely. And for that reason, a lot of money has frequently been shifted into it, sort of as a workaround. It is your loophole. He says that he will work it back into the base budget. He'll combine these two accounts and bring things back to the way that they're supposed to be if Congress gets rid of the caps. Now you see how that's sort of a contradiction. We would like to keep the caps in order to keep spending under control, but then the president says, no, 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 let's get rid of the caps, and then I'll bring back in this account that you're sort of upset about because it's avoiding this budgetary control. I'll bring that back in, but we can, then we can spend whatever we want. So the idea is that those caps should stay in place, essentially, and it looks like from what we're hearing from the budget committees, they are not interested in getting rid of those caps. So we'll see how that plays out in Congress. But right now it looks like they're interested in keeping the caps. So as I mentioned, $534 billion, that's $35 billion over those budget caps already. So what this comes down to is Congress is going to have to find $35 billion just in that base budget to cut. Now, when you look at the rest of this money, the 053 and the 054, this is where you're going to find your nuclear weapons spending. Another $3 billion is going to have to come from that. Theoretically, they can find that total $38 billion anywhere they'd like, but that is the way it breaks down percentage-wise. About $35 billion should come from the Department of Defense base budget, and $3 billion should come from the rest. Now, as I said, that $51 billion for the wars, that's completely immune. And because that's completely immune, we've seen a lot of money for base budget programs in the past couple of years shift into that war account. And even the Pentagon is openly acknowledging that now. They're saying, yes, over these years that we've had this overseas contingency operations account, some things from the base budget that would normally be funded there, those have shifted into that account. And that's just the way that we're budgeting now. This is sort of a tough question. Bringing down the budget is not necessarily going to be easy unless we combine things, bring them all back together, and essentially go from there. So diving down a little bit deeper into that war funding account, you might think, well, we're back in conflict overseas. Things have gotten really bad. Of course, they need more money, right, to fight ISIS. But when you look at the breakdown, you'll see that the large majority of that money is still going to Afghanistan, and that is for the reconstitution of weapons that we've used over the years, even though a lot of those weapons have actually been replaced while the wars were ongoing. And it's also, interestingly enough, going to fund a lot of our infrastructure overseas. We don't know as much as we'd really like about this account because a lot of it's classified. But what we do know is that a large portion of it is definitely going to fund things that really should appear in the base budget and therefore should be subject to the budget caps. So here's a breakdown, and this is probably a lot more information than you need, but just in case you're interested, this is a breakdown of how this comes out by service. So Army, Navy, Air Force, and defense-wide, what percentage of the budget they get. Why this is interesting is because right now Congress and the Pentagon are engaged in a debate over the idea of what would be called a National Sea-Based Deterrence Fund. And that fund would appear not in the Navy's budget. That fund is for a submarine, but it would not appear in the Navy's budget. It would appear in the defense-wide budget. That fund has already been created by last year's authorization, but right now there's no money in it because the appropriators refused to put money in it. That submarine that it would build is a nuclear submarine. It's the Ohio-class replacement submarine. The Navy, the reason why they would like for this fund to appear not in their own account but in a separate account is because it's very huge. It's actually so huge that over the long term it would eat up their entire shipbuilding budget. And so the Navy, being like any big business, says, well, we can't spend all of our money in this one thing. We really would like, you know, it would sure be nice if we could have another fund, give us another account, and, you know, we'll buy it there instead, because clearly we can't go giving up all of our other programs just for this one nuclear submarine that we might never use. So they have created this account. It exists there. What has happened now is that the Air Force would like their own account too, because they have two legs of the triad, and so why shouldn't they also be able to fund their very expensive nuclear programs in a separate account? So this is an ongoing debate. It's very unlikely that Congress is going to go for this sort of budgeting gimmick. It would allow the Navy and the Air Force not only to shove out programs in the defense-wide account rather than picking and choosing and making choices among their own programs, it would also increase effectively their budget share even more significantly over the Army, which already has a smaller budget share, you can see. And so there's always sort of infighting between the three sort of siblings, and as with any siblings. And so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. It's something to watch. It's something to be aware of, and it's definitely something, if you hear it come up, to let folks know that you oppose it, because it's really ultimately a budgeting gimmick and not something that any service or any program really should be able to get away with within the larger budget system. So a little bit more, we talked about the Budget Control Act caps. These are the Budget Control Act caps throughout the years once they were enacted, and now you can see now how they compare with the President's base budget request. So what you can see here is that the President's base budget request, even out to fiscal year 20, comes in at significantly more than the Budget Control Act caps. So the President is very much banking on the idea that Congress will go along with these increases, and that they will be just as interested in getting rid of the Budget Control Act as he is, and that they can go forward with a higher budget overall. So this, again, you can see how the caps compare with the President's fiscal year 16, this year's base request, and see that they're significantly higher. What's interesting about this request, though, the President would really like it to go like the out years to go up, but this isn't necessarily something new for him. In past years, you can see these are his requests for 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, and you can see it a little bit better here. Each year, his request they've been high every year, but each year they've come down closer and closer to where the Budget Control Act caps actually lie. And but that's been a process. So the President has been aiming high from the beginning, and he will continue to aim high. This is largely because the administration has maintained, actually ever since the Budget Control Act was proposed, they have maintained that they do not want the Budget Control Act caps to be in place. They don't want sequestration to happen. They want to be able to find that money through a combination of additional revenues and cuts that Congress is able to make to address those issues. So they are not interested in maintaining this status quo. They want to see a larger budget deal with Congress that ultimately contains revenues. This is the Department of Defense's top line. This is you can see it since 2001. How this is the darker blue is the base budget, the lighter blue is the war funding, and this is how it has increased over the years, gone down, and has essentially, you can see, flattened out a little bit. But now we would be beginning to take a big jump up and continuing to move up over the years. If we were to go with this budget that the President has requested, which, by the way, without adjusting for inflation, the President's base budget of $534 billion is actually the largest base Pentagon request ever. So that's without adjusting for inflation. We did see higher requests in previous years, but it's been quite a long time since we've seen a higher request. And you can see there's a $27 billion placeholder that the President has put in for the out years, the 17 through 20, for the wars. But again, the President would like to see that account gotten rid of and all of this put back in one, but would still like to see the same level of funding. So you see that increase. Now we're getting down into the nitty-gritty of the nuclear weapons budget. This is what you saw on the first slide. This is the 053 account. This is the nuclear weapons activities at the Department of Energy. So what's most interesting about this particular slide is that weapons activities has gone up slightly here. That's just what it sounds like. That's the nuclear weapons. It has gone up slightly this year, the request, and we'll get into a little bit later the entirety of nuclear weapons funding, because it's not all contained right here in this one line item. It's actually spread out throughout the entire budget, and so we have an estimate of that actual spending a little bit later on. But what's interesting about this, and this gives a good quick look at exactly where the administration is going with their funding. The weapons activities account has gone up pretty significantly, from just over $8 billion to almost $9 billion. The nuclear non-proliferation account, which funds things like the Global Threat Reduction Initiative and non-proliferation programs in the U.S. and overseas, that has also gone up. But what you don't see here in these line items is that a significant amount of money, $234 million, has actually shifted from weapons activities to the non-proliferation account. And so while it looks like both have gone up fairly significantly, the non-proliferation account has actually gone up only a very small bit, while the weapons activities account has gone up much more significantly. Ultimately, when you take those changes, when you take that counterterrorism funding into account, the non-proliferation account has gone up by about 5%, and the weapons activities account has gone up by about 11%. So 11% in terms of these budgets is a pretty giant number. So we see a very big dedication to weapons activities in this particular request. Here is, again, more information than you need, but it's there if you want it. There's been a lot of shifting this year in the non-proliferation account. This is largely due to our changing relationship with Russia. The Global Threat Reduction Initiative, for example, is no longer a part of this account. We are now talking about a different line item that will do similar things, but not in Russia, in other countries overseas. And so they have, to accommodate those changes, they have changed a lot of the names of accounts, and they've shifted things around pretty significantly. To organize things a little bit more clearly. The more important thing about this account to know is that though we see a small increase, even a 5% increase after taking counterterrorism into account, this year, we're actually still down pretty significantly from even the fiscal year 2013 enacted amount. So since 2013, the Obama administration and Congress have both, and you see Congress consistently appropriating at a lower level than the president is requesting here. So these are, as I mentioned, the projected costs for nuclear forces over the next 10 years, but also you'll see on the left just for 2015. So this information comes from the Congressional Budget Office, from CBO. As I mentioned, nuclear weapons spending is spread out quite significantly throughout many accounts, throughout different departments, and throughout the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy. And for this reason, and because not all of the information down to each individual line item is available publicly, it's very hard for someone outside of the government, such as myself, to pull that information and compile it in a way that is complete and gives a whole picture of what nuclear weapons actually cost. So the Congressional Budget Office for the past 2 years has put together a report that actually does tell us, give us a very conservative estimate of the amount of money that goes to nuclear weapons every year. And what they have come to is in 2015, we spent about almost $24 billion on nuclear weapons. That is SSBMs, submarines, ICBMs, which is the missiles, ICBMs, bombers, being airplanes, tactical and other being other components of nuclear delivery systems, command and control, and the labs and support, and that's spread across the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy. And that does not include environmental cleanup or missile defense, some other things that some estimates that you may have seen of nuclear weapons spending include. So as I said, this is a conservative estimate. Another thing is it also includes only 25% of the cost of those systems that also have a conventional mission. So those things that can be used both in regular warfare and for nuclear warfare, such as airplanes that both drop regular bombs and nuclear bombs, we're only considering 25% of the cost of those particular programs. So a conservative estimate, even coming in at a relatively pretty high number for 1 year, $24 billion, and over 10 years, $350 billion, which if you think about that in 30 years is about $1 trillion. This is just a visual of CBOs. This is actually straight from CBO. This shows the adjusted total if you consider 100% of those programs that also have a conventional mission, as I mentioned, but also gives you a little bit of an idea of the cost of these nuclear forces over the years, in the out years, over 10. But the interesting thing to take into consideration for this is some of these big programs, the long-range bomber and the submarine, the costs of those are really ballooning sort of at the very end of this. They're ballooning in the mid-2020s and in the 2030s. So where we're going to see the majority of the costs for those programs is really down the road even a little bit further. So this doesn't give, this is for the next 10 years, but it will be a bigger cost over the long term. So, and just to give you some perspective and also to talk a little bit about the overall president's budget, as I said, nuclear weapons spending about $24 billion. The F-35, which you might have heard a little bit about, it's a weapon system that has been plagued by a lot of troubles, largely due to the fact that it's plagued by concurrent development, which is something that we deal with a lot in the development of weapons systems, in that it's being tested and flown prior to, and it's being built while it's still being tested and problems are still being worked out. So they're building new planes as they're still discovering problems with the older planes. And that's created sort of a lot of going back and having to fix the old problems that we're constantly dealing with. And so the cost of this program has really ballooned. It's become the Pentagon's biggest and most expensive program. And you see this year it actually got a giant increase. We're buying 57 F-35s as opposed to, I think, 36 in last year's request. And that's $11 billion. That's still about half of what we're spending on the entirety of our nuclear weapons programs, including all of the things that we're building and the command and control. The rest of these programs they look quite cheap in comparison. $1.6 billion for 19 Ospreys, 1.9 for 3 littoral combat ships, 1.4. This is actually 1.4. So although they look cheap in comparison, the Ohio-class replacement submarine is, of course, one portion of the rest of the nuclear weapons budget. And as I mentioned, the cost for that is still very small right now. It will be ballooning in the out years, in the 2020s and the 2030s. Same with the long-range bomber, which is $1.25 billion right now. And we see we have a significant increase for modernization of the ICBM leg of the triad that is up to $75.2 million from $6.9 million last year. So some significant investment in that modernization. And also what we saw this year that was new is $36.6 million for the development of a new air-launched cruise missile. So lots of money in general going this year to nuclear weapons spending and the modernization of all 3 legs of the triad. But as I said, that will grow significantly in the out years and is definitely something to keep in mind. So with that, I will turn it over back again to Teresa, and I am so happy to answer any of the questions that you have, and please do ask. You can type them in, I believe.
All right. Thank you very much, Laicie, for those extremely helpful insights into the budget. So now that you have the insider scoop on nuclear weapons spending in 2016, what can you do as a taxpayer to change the way our money is spent? Well, one thing you can do is take action with PSR's Action Alert. Next week, PSR will be sending out an action alert asking you to contact your senators and representatives in support of the SANE Act, or the Smarter Approach to Nuclear Expenditures Act. This is expected to be introduced next week by Senator Markey and Congressman Blumenauer. The SANE Act would provide flexibility in planning for the future and help ensure that maintaining a bloated nuclear arsenal doesn't shortchange more pressing defense priorities. Another thing you can do is write an op-ed and send it into your local newspaper, or you can respond to an article you saw in the paper by writing a letter to the editor. You can also lobby your representatives, senators, and congressional staff in your state, and you can use social media to send a message on Facebook and tweet at your representatives. Actually, a recent statistic shows that social media is becoming the more prevalent means of gaining the notice of government officials. So just in case you need more help on ways to make an impact, everyone will receive a follow-up email tomorrow listing helpful tips on how to phone and email your Congress members. There will also be a link that will show you how to submit op-eds and letters to the editor. All right, so this concludes the presentation part of the webinar. I will now hand it over to Martin Fleck, our Security Program Director at PSR, who has been compiling your questions throughout the presentation.
Why, thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Laicie. And one of the first questions that we had is, will the slides be made available to us? And I think I can answer that question, which is that the webinar is being recorded and will be available at psr.org tomorrow. So there's, that was easy. That one was easy. Another question is, is the big increase for modernization of the ICBM leg of the triad. Is that due to Eric Schlosser's book and all the coverage it received?
Well, I don't think we can say exactly what the increase, the big increase this particular year is due to, but this is not new. There has certainly been talk of shoring up this leg of the triad as well, and we did expect an increase, maybe not this big of a jump this year. But given that the president has invested pretty significantly in almost everything else in the budget this year, it's not super surprising to see a jump for yet another weapon system.
Okay, I have a question for you, Laicie, which is about the SANE Act. Are we expecting that the person introducing the SANE Act in the House this year will be Representative Blumenauer again?
I believe so. Actually, Martin, you may be able to talk much more about that than I am. I know that PSR has been very closely involved with making sure that legislation goes forward and has a lot of support, and we certainly support it as well, but haven't been quite so involved.
Okay. So there's a question about, yes, well, last I heard, that was expected to be Representative Blumenauer who introduced it in 2014. And so we'll know all that by next week. There have been questions, about what's included and what isn't included. So we're looking at, you had a chart that showed 23.9 billion from the various accounts. But there's questions about other expenses out there. So I had a question here. You and the CBO have excluded environmental costs. So that's like, cleanup of the complex,
yes,
Hanford and all the other parts of the nuclear weapons complex around the country, Oak Ridge, Rocky Flats, Livermore, Los Alamos, all those places. Shouldn't we include those costs? And why not provide the total cost as from the Brookings Institution report called Atomic Cost?
A lot of folks who have done these estimates, as I mentioned, absolutely include those environmental costs. So that is about $7 to $8 billion. That in addition, the environmental costs, and actually CBO in its report last year, now they didn't, and I'm not sure of the reason, they didn't include it in their report this year, but in their report last year, they did include a separate line item that included both environmental costs and missile defense. And ultimately, all of those costs, and they also included, but see, what they also included in this was some arms control activities. So as arms control advocates, as non-proliferation advocates, we have to consider what these estimates are, what exactly we're trying to estimate. So if we feel that there's too much money being spent on the weapons side of things, and that should be drawn down, that doesn't necessarily mean that we want to stop cleanup at a lot of these sites. Or that a lot of those things wouldn't continue even if we were to get rid of nuclear weapons today, because a lot of that damage has already been done. And so when CBO doesn't include those estimates, that's essentially what they're trying to convey. They're trying to convey that this is the conservative amount of money that's actually being spent on the weapons side of things, and then they sometimes also separate out, there is another $20 billion that is being spent on, A, missile defense, which you may also want to lump in with the weapons, B, environmental cleanup, and C, arms control activities. And so it's sort of a grab bag, and depending on where you come from on the ideological spectrum, it's what you might want to include there, but it ultimately is, it sort of comes down to that.
Well, Laicie, I wanted to say thank you to you for, I know that when the budget comes out, right, it's about as big as a gigantic Bible, and I can't imagine what it's like trying to dive in there and find all of these little pieces to make the charts that you've shown us tonight. So I really do appreciate that. I wanted to point out, too, about the non-proliferation. Just like with cleanup of the legacy of the nuclear weapons production, and we want to fund cleanup of places like Hanford, we also certainly want to fund non-proliferation. And so that's one of these charts where we want to see those numbers high. It's only in the millions of dollars typically, but we want to see it high. We don't want to see that cut, and that's something that PSR will be advocating, is reinstating non-proliferation funding. So thanks for your detailed analysis on that. And another question here, is there any support from Republican budget hawks to cut the nuclear weapons budget? Let's hear it for fiscal conservatives.
Yes, yeah, hey, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for all the work you guys do on the non-proliferation budget. There absolutely is the campaign that I work quite a lot with on the overall defense budget side, not necessarily on the specific nuclear weapons budget side. It contains a lot of fiscal conservatives and a lot of folks who are really interested in partnering, and that doesn't end at nuclear weapons. That encompasses nuclear weapons, and in many cases there are a lot of folks in Congress, new members, who are more interested in cutting the nuclear weapons budget, absolutely. Unfortunately, there's also a large contingent that is very interested in shifting funding from the non-proliferation budget into the weapons budget. And so that's something to watch, and that's something that, as Martin mentioned, we'll all be advocating against and trying to protect that non-proliferation budget that often gets sort of robbed to feed the weapons side of things.
So I've got a question here about what parts of the weapons budget, you know, our folks who are on this call, Laicie, of course, you know, they're looking to cut these nuclear weapons programs. So I have a question here about might it help to focus on one or two of the many increases in nuclear weapons funding that might be most ripe for opposition, either because they're unnecessary or they're the most expensive? And where would you suggest that we focus in our lobbying or in an op-ed? And I can tell you that the person asking this question is an experienced op-ed writer and lobbyist. So which part of nuclear weapons modernization should we be focusing on?
Hi, Peter. I can see your name on there on the back end. And thank you. That's a really, really good question, and one that I think we are all struggling with right now as well, trying to pick that you know, those one or two things that are absolutely the things that we want to focus on most specifically. And I think that right now we are, the air-launched cruise missile, I think, is one of the major things, because this is, you know, sort of new funding and exploratory funding that we are thinking of looking at cutting it off before it really gets going. And you know, that's some of these bigger weapons systems, some of these things like the Ohio class replacement sub and especially the long range strike bomber. Those are going to be much harder to stop at this point. They're in it, and you know, with the long range strike bomber, you also have a conventional mission. So you're looking at a program that you're going to have much less luck with. The sub, however, you know, I think in the past this coalition, this group of people has seen some success in working toward reducing at least the number of submarines that we buy. And there's been some really good recommendations from other groups, and CBO even puts out its own recommendations, I think, on cutting that number of submarines. So going forward in the future, that's also something to think about. But I think that this year that air-launched cruise missile is going to be something to focus in on, and perhaps as well continue, some of the other smaller funding that we see. Looking back at my.
Thanks. I've been hearing that the the National Sea-Based Deterrent Fund is an important item in the budget to concentrate on. And so my question about that is, I heard you say that that fund, sort of as a bank account, was authorized last year, but they didn't actually put any money in the bank account,
Yes.
if I understood you right.
Right, exactly. So that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
The defense authorization last year created this bank account. It exists now in the Defense-Wide Fund. And actually, as it stands, the Pentagon has the transfer authority to transfer money from the Navy's budget into that account. Right now, though, the account is actually set up to fund procurement, whereas right now we're still in the research and development phase. So the idea is going forward, as we come to where that procurement money starts popping up, that they would actually choose to transfer that procurement money into that account. And that's when we're really going to have to start to worry about it, is when some of that money pops up. Right now, they have not requested that we move any of that R&D money into the account, although they still could do that. And appropriations still could move money into the account if they chose to. And of course, when they're looking at cutting $38 billion from the 050 budget, they're going to, it could come up. Somebody's going to think of this, and they're going to say, hey, that account's sitting over there, and, let's have an amendment that moves things over. So it's something to watch out for. It's something to be on alert for if you see it pop up. And it's something that, even right now, it never hurts to write an op-ed just saying this is a totally ridiculous idea and we shouldn't even be considering it at all.
Do we have any fiscal conservative allies on that score who see this as sleight of hand, budgetary sleight of hand, and therefore would be opposed to it?
Yes, this is a perfect fiscal conservative issue, actually. This is something that, this is their bread and butter. This is something that doesn't make a lot of sense. It makes no sense to be moving this around. It's a budget gimmick, and it's a budget gimmick that benefits the Navy to the detriment of the rest of the Pentagon's budget. I actually, anecdotally, I talked to a guy on the House Armed Services Committee after a recent briefing that we did who said, oh, it's no big deal. There's just a bunch of missile defense money in there anyway. You can get rid of that. So in the Defense-Wide Fund, that is the only other weapons program that appears in the Defense-Wide Fund. The rest of it is actually money for commissaries and other various things. And really, ultimately, if you want to cut those things, it still doesn't make any sense to move that money over there and choose it. Give the Navy a free pass to not have to fit it into their own budget.
Yeah, I think that we should avoid that. Laicie, I think it was on one of your slides, but I don't remember the number. But what's the estimate for once when the year 2040 rolls around, and if the Pentagon has gotten all the submarines they want? I mean, what is the total cost of that program?
I don't have the total. I think it's $90 billion. I believe it's $80 to $90 billion once it's all said and done for the for that particular program. But that's about it's about $80 or $90 billion for that program. It's $80 or $90 billion for the long-range strike bomber, and it's another $40 million or $1 billion or something along those lines. We don't know exactly what the estimate would be for the ICBM legs. So it's a lot of money when we're talking about all of these billions of dollars that would be spent, hundreds of billions of dollars that would be spent on modernizing all three legs.
Yeah, it's 80 billion here, 90 billion there. Before you know it, you're talking about real money.
Quite a bit.
All right. One of our doctors, Dr. Robert Dodge in Los Angeles, wants to call attention to a project of his and of the Los Angeles chapters, and that's the community costs calculator. So this is a way, if you're working on an op-ed or talking to your local United States representative, this is a way to get some sense of how much is a particular locality, community spending in terms of tax money for the nuclear programs. And the community cost calculator does include national missile defense spending, non-Luger spending, the non-proliferation spending, the legacy spending for cleaning up the complex. I'm not sure if it includes the debt and the percentage of the debt that is related to nuclear weapons. But anyway,
I've unmuted Bob if you want to ask him.
Okay. Bob, are you?
Hi. Yeah, no, I don't have a specific debt calculation. As we've been all saying, it's just these things are all. It's like playing a shell game, looking under all the shells for where they are. But so I don't have a debt calculation. But when I've talked to Plowshares and actually talked to Stephen Schwartz, he's very comfortable. They're both very comfortable with the number that I'm using for the total amount. So
Okay. So the website is www.psr-la.org/nuclear-costs. So if you go to psrla.org, you can also go there through psr.org and go to the Los Angeles chapter and take a look at the nuclear cost calculator. So thank you, Bob. We also, speaking of Stephen Schwartz, he made a comment with regards to the why the big increase in the ICBMs. This is really a comment. The increase in spending for ICBMs is a response to the new reports about significant problems within that leg. The missileers run amok, the dismissal of 2 high-ranking officers overseeing the missile force, low morale. The Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Air Force have both said repeatedly that ICBMs are the Air Force's #1 priority. And here's a question. Can you address this?
Just to add to that, there's also a significant amount of funding in this budget to address those issues within the force and to invest in the force. So that's gone even beyond that increase.
Mm-hmm. Can you address the assertion? Okay, Laicie, here's one for you. Can you address the assertion by many advocates of increasing spending on nuclear weapons, especially in the military, that they only consume about 4 or 5% of the gross domestic product?
So I think that I think that is what you're talking about, that we should, a lot of the 4% for freedom. There's an argument that we should actually pin our weapon or our Pentagon spending to 4% of GDP.
This is about are there reasons why the gross domestic product is not an appropriate measure of how much we are or should be spending on nuclear weapons?
Yeah, it's absolutely not a good measure. It's a lot of times we hear folks, there are sort of 2 ways of looking at overall weapons spending that tend to be tend to not give the whole picture. One of those is when we compare ourselves to other countries. This doesn't give the whole picture because the costs of maintaining a force in the U.S. are obviously much higher than the costs of maintaining a force in China. But in some ways, these are also, when we compare ourselves to our NATO allies, that's when we see a little bit more usefulness in that. In GDP, a lot of folks would like us to peg our weapons spending to a certain percentage of GDP, and that's because in the past, many years years ago, when our GDP was much lower, we were spending a larger percentage of our GDP. Now, that makes no sense at all, because over time, as our economy has grown and as the country has grown, we have had the ability to be more prosperous, to spend more on more things. And therefore, our military budget, which is still massively high, and I think that actually a really interesting fact is the Overseas Contingency Operations account, just the war account, is the 5th largest federal agency. There's a group that does this every year, and they list out the, where it falls within those. And at $51 billion, it's actually the 5th largest federal agency. So even just the OCO account, which is nothing, of course, the base budget is the largest, but it's extremely high, the amount of money that we spend on our military. And to spend 4% of our GDP would be, I'm not sure exactly what the number is, but the increase would be just exponential and not at all matched to the threats that we have and the actual security environment. And how we have to be creating our budget is based on the threats and based on a strategy that's created by the Pentagon and not based on some arbitrary number.
That makes sense to me. So we have many opportunities coming up to comment on this how shall we say, extreme spending on nuclear weapons. April 15th, Tax Day coming up, is a great opportunity. And then shortly thereafter, there will be the Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference, where the United States and other nuclear powers are committed to disarmament, but they're dragging their heels. And there will be other opportunities after that. This is the 70th anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki this year. And so I'm encouraging folks that are on the phone to take advantage of these opportunities to get the word out about what you've learned here tonight. And you can look at the slides and study up on that by visiting psr.org starting tomorrow. And with that, Laicie, I want to say thank you, and I'm going to hand it back to Teresa, our MC.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. All right. Well, thank you again to everyone for joining and for your excellent questions. We hope that this webinar has empowered you to take action and change the way our tax money is being spent. A very special thanks to Laicie Heeley for sharing her expertise with us tonight. We hope to hear from all of you soon, and we hope to see you again on our next webinar. Good night, everyone.